Welcome to another episode of Out from the Horrorbox. I'm your undead host, Dom, and in this episode we take a look at the 2023 comedic horror film from director Chris McKay and inspired by the characters from Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula, Renfield. Vampires were really big in the late 90s and the early 2000s, as well as a few failed attempts at trying to bring Dracula into the modern day. That's what they tried to do. We'll get into it a little bit later, especially with trying to modernize and trying to make a universe out of everything. It's just a little ridiculous. But anyways, having Nicolas Cage as Dracula works on so many levels, and I'm going to save my final thoughts on the film for later, but for now, let's bite straight into the film. In July 2014, Universal Pictures announced classic horror film properties, including the character of Count Dracula, as part of a unified shared universe with Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan attached to oversee its development. After the negative reception of Dracula Untold, its connections to a unified series were downplayed, especially because I believe at the end it kind of hints at like, oh, what's that? Oh, I think it's going to be like, I think it has a post-credit scene. I never saw the film, but I heard that it has like a post-credit scene that's kind of meant to set things up for a future like universe, the way like Marvel did and DC has tried, and so many other like the monster universe, which is I think the not this, but like the Godzilla universe or whatever it's called. I think it's called the monster universe. But they have a lot of like post-credit scenes that show like, oh, see, there's going to be more movies in the series and like other connections. But yeah, they were downplayed like heavily. And in 2017, that's when they released The Mummy, which was a reimagined version with Tom Cruise. And they repositioned that as the first film in the series. The Mummy was a critical and commercial failure, and it resulted in Universal's decision to shift its focus to individual storytelling and move away from the shared universe concept. The film entered development hell after the commercial failure of The Mummy in 2017. That's the Renfield. While like whatever was going to be the film that they were going to produce out of that movie that eventually became Renfield entered development hell. So Universal's Dark Universe was an attempt to create a modern cinematic universe based on the classic Universal monster film series. A remake of The Bride of Frankenstein with Angelina Jolie attached for the lead was originally scheduled for release on February 14, 2019. But October 5th, 2017, Universal decided to postpone it indefinitely. The 2014 film Dracula Untold, like we said, was originally considered to be the first film in the series, but that, they dropped that. And the film's connection was downplayed, like we said. And The Mummy was then repositioned. On May 22nd, 2017, the official Dark Universe Twitter account posted an image with Tom Cruise, Sofia Boutella, Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem, and Russell Crowe standing together. The picture was revealed to be edited, with none of the cast of the Dark Universe having actually been together when it was taken. By 2019, Universal announced plans to return to standalone features instead of using a shared film narrative, effectively ending the Dark Universe. Kind of great, because like I think if they had tried to just keep shoving it, it would have just failed like the DC EU. It would have just been like, we're getting another film, okay, and nobody would have gotten to see it, and just would have been a waste of money. On April 2014, Robert Orci would depart from his producing duties in order to focus on directing the third Star Trek film, while Alex Kurtzman would continue developing The Mummy. Universal then paired Kurtzman and Chris Morgan, credited for rebooting, quote-unquote, the Fast and Furious franchise. I think that he came in during, like, the fifth or the sixth one or something like that, and, like, that, I think that's when they introduced The Rock and kind of breathed a new life into the series. I'm pretty sure it was, like, the sixth or seventh one of those ones. To oversee the new shared universe featuring the Universal monsters. Days later, Kurtzman was in final talks to helm the film. A new release date of June 24, 2016 was given at month's end, and Jenny Lumet of Rachel Getting Married was brought in for further rewrites. Lumet chose to turn the titular character from a man to a woman without notifying the studios beforehand. The writer strived to humanize the antagonists and not have them be evil for the sake of evil, or not pining away for some lost love. Another delay resulted in the film being pushed to March 2017. Kirkman later pitched a new version of the film, leaning more into the comedic aspects of the story, and the production rights were acquired by Skybound Entertainment. Dexter Fletcher was originally announced as director in 2019, but McKay eventually replaced him, working out the Ridley script and Kirkman's original pitch. Renfield was described as a comedic approach to the story of Count Dracula, in the vein of Taika Waititi's vampire mockumentary What We Do in the Shadows, that focused on the character of Renfield. In 2020, Lee Winnell's The Invisible Man became a commercial and critical success for Universal and served as a relaunch to its monster universe. In April 2021, Chris McKay entered negotiations to direct after Fletcher left to work on a reboot of The Saint for Paramount Pictures. McKay was hired because it was reportedly gave a successful pitch combining the story's mix of humor and action, something the studio was looking to have more of. In March 2023, McKay described the film as a quasi-sequel to Universal's 1931 English-language film Dracula, depicting the same characters of Dracula and Renfield 90 years on, with the film's black and white opening scene depicting the beginning of Dracula, with Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult respectively inserted in place of Bela Lugosi and Dwight Frye as Count Dracula and Renfield. And honestly, they do a seamless job. It looks really good, the way that they just kind of insert them, and they do the parts really well in the scenes that they've inserted them in, because they insert them in a couple of scenes besides just the beginning, and I think it works out pretty well to give you that kind of idea of, yeah, this is supposed to just be a continuation of that one. You could watch the original one and then this one. I mean, sure, you're going from Bela Lugosi to Nicolas Cage, and maybe it's a little bit more ridiculous, but they kind of address like some of the like things in the film. So without further ado, though, let's just get on to Renfield.
Sorry to interrupt.
Are you okay?
I need to get out of a toxic relationship.
Why don't you start by telling us what brought you here?
My boss, he's different.
You can't get him out of your head.
No.
I need your assistance.
I'm coming, Master!
Oh, you feel like he could destroy you with the snap of his fingers.
Wouldn't even need to snap.
Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, what?
Renfield, bring in innocent victims. I want a handful of nuns, a busload of cheerleaders.
And I just want a normal life again. But this modern world is a dangerous place.
Thank you. You saved my life. Did I watch you cut a guy with a decorative serving platter?
It's all in the wrist. Let me explain. My boss gave me this power. In return, I tend to his needs, including care, feeding.
You bring him people to eat? You're like the guy that gets the villain's Postmates.
But if you were to stop focusing on his needs, what would happen?
He won't grow to full power.
Exactly. He won't grow to full power. What? That's so weird. Why would you phrase it like that? But yes. Hi, are you here for the meeting? Well, come on. No!
Some call me the Dark One, others the Lord of Death. To most, I am Dracula.
Okay, obviously we're dealing with a little bit more than just narcissism here.
Now, let's eat.
In the early 20th century, Transylvanian vampire Count Dracula, played by Nicolas Cage, meets English lawyer R.M. Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult. Hoping to broker a deal for some land, Renfield instead ends up becoming Dracula's familiar, a companion that protects a supernatural entity. Renfield elects not to help a priest and vampire hunter from killing Dracula and forces Renfield to continue serving him. 90 years later, Renfield relies on the superhuman strength and agelessness Dracula has given him through regularly eating bugs. Dracula is still recuperating from the vampire hunters who almost killed him, so the duo moves to New Orleans. There, Renfield discovers a 12-step self-help group for persons in codependent relationships, and plans to hunt out the group's abusive lovers so he can kill and give to Dracula to feast on without feeling remorse. Renfield follows the boyfriend of a group member to a warehouse with stolen drugs and confronts them. But they are all attacked by an assassin hired by the rival Lobo crime family. After killing the assassin, Renfield unsuccessfully attempts to hunt down the man who hired them, Teddy Lobo, played by Ben Schwartz, who drives off in a hurry, and a weakened Renfield drags the corpse back to Dracula's lair in the basement of the dilapidated charity hospital. Teddy runs into a sobriety checkpoint that is run by Rebecca Quincy, played by Aquafina, a second-generation police officer who arrests Teddy after he hurls bricks of cocaine at her police. At the police station, Teddy is released from custody by corrupt police officers, while Rebecca has a confrontation with her sister Kate, an FBI agent. She is played by Camille Chan. Dracula tells Renfield that the criminals he has brought as food are insufficient, and the vampire desires the blood of someone pure and innocent instead. Renfield goes to a restaurant to abduct commoners, while Rebecca is also led there by clues from the crime scene. The two are caught in an attack on Rebecca's life that Teddy has been pressured into making so that the fierce reputation of the Lobos will be reestablished. Instead, Renfield and Rebecca defend themselves, killing several gang members and leading Teddy to escape. Teddy's mother, Bella Francesca, played by Shorey Agdashlu, orders him to hunt down the man who killed her foot soldiers, and he ends up encountering Dracula when Renfield is away. The two agree to form an alliance, while Renfield has taken to heart the teachings of his self-help group and decides to make a life for himself apart from his master. Setting up an apartment and changing his attitude one of helpfulness, Renfield gives a statement to the police to help them try and finally stop the Lobos. However, Dracula learns of Renfield's betrayal and slaughters the group members in front of his former minion. Rebecca appears and finds Renfield surrounded by dead bodies, causing her to arrest him until she is swarmed by corrupt police officers and the Lobos, who also want revenge on Renfield. Rebecca refuses to hand Renfield over, and she barely escapes with him. The next morning, Rebecca finds that Renfield has saved her life, and he explains his true origin while confirming that he wants to reform himself. The two fight through a group of corrupt police officers and decide to storm the Lobos' headquarters, only to find that Dracula has empowered over half a dozen gang members to have all of Renfield's supernatural abilities, including Teddy. After a fight, Renfield kills Teddy. Rebecca heads to stop Dracula, only to find that Kate is beaten to near death, and only the healing properties of Dracula's blood can save her, which he will offer in exchange for Rebecca's loyalty. She tricks Dracula, leading him to having a final standoff with Renfield and Rebecca that ends with the two collaborating to capture him in a magical circle. Renfield and Rebecca beat Dracula into pieces, capture his healing blood, and divide up the bits of his corpse into pieces of concrete that they scatter across the water system, either finally destroying the vampire or at least making it very hard for him to reform his body. Renfield later resurrects his self-help group, friends, and him feeling empowered to make a new life for himself. Alright, so let's get into some trivia for the film. First up, Nicolas Cage's uncle, Francis Ford Coppola, directed Dracula back in 1992. The studio wanted Nicolas Cage, but instead of Keanu Reeves, who went on to play Jonathan Harker, but Coppola did not want to work with him after what he called hijacking the movie with his acting choices, referring to their bad experience on Peggy Sue Got Married. So I guess not always is your relative going to give you a job just because they are your relative. I mean, obviously he did back with Peggy Sue Got Married, but then I guess he kind of acted like a Nicolas Cage in that movie. You know what I mean? Like he kind of gave one of those things that he's known for, which is giving a portrayal that's kind of off, kind of weird. And so that's probably why obviously that's why he was like, I don't want you coming back for this film. I don't want you on here. I'd rather have Keanu Reeves with this weird weird British take of his if you've ever seen Dracula, I don't know why you would go with Keanu Reeves because he doesn't give a great English accent. But it's fine for, I think everything else in the movie works so well that you can kind of ignore it for a little bit. But other than that, it would have been interesting to see Nicolas Cage in that role. I still don't know if it would have worked. I think people would have been would have called it out even worse than what they do for Keanu Reeves, honestly. Okay, Chris McKay convinced the studio of casting Nicolas Cage for Dracula by showing executives Kiss of Death, a crime movie where Cage was menacing and funny at the same time. I haven't seen Kiss of Death, so I'm not sure, but I think it's very interesting because when you hear Nicolas Cage as Dracula, you're at first you're kind of no way, that's going to be ridiculous, it's going to be over the top, but then you're wait. Maybe for this, though, it might work. And honestly, it did work for this. I think his kind of weird take on things sometimes honestly worked for this to be kind of weird and over the top, but still enough to work for this film. And I think having seen him in other films, especially I would say he just recently did what's it called, Color Beyond Space or whatever. That one, I think, okay, yeah, you could kind of, I mean, it's still, his acting's still kind of weird in that one, but it's a little bit better than what I've seen him in sometimes, where it's you can tell he's just doing this for money because he owed a lot of money because he just spent a bunch of money. So, and then I think also too the one that he just did with Pedro Pascal, the unbearable weight of whatever talent or whatever, immeasurable talent or something. I think that kind of helped to get him into this role, and honestly I think he works pretty well as Dracula in this role. So despite a history of turning down non-leading roles in studio films, Nicolas Cage signed on to play Dracula. It was a lifelong dream of his to portray the legendary figure. Captain Nemo, Superman, and Dracula were the three roles Nicolas Cage dreamed about playing when he started his acting career. He got to voice Superman in Teen Titans Go to the movies in 2018. Plays Dracula here, and I think for The Flash, I haven't seen The Flash because I really didn't want to support what's his name or what's their name, Ezra Miller, and I really think that they should have just replaced them. But anyways, beyond that, I heard that he comes back because he was supposed to play, I guess, Superman in a movie at one point that was going to be directed by Kevin Smith, and I think I've seen parts, like some like stills of it, and it's like I think it would have been weird for him to portray Superman, just because, like, I mean, if you don't know, like, notorious Nicolas Cage for being in these weird movies, or these movies where it's like he's just over the top for no reason, or he's just giving this weird portrayal for no reason that people are like, huh? He does good in some films, like I mean, even the one he won an Academy Award for Best Actor in Leaving Las Vegas. It's still like a weird portrayal. I think he does good in like Kick-Ass, and he was good as Spider-Man Noir. I think he was in Into the Spider-Verse. But then there's just some other things where it's just like, why are you in this? Why are you acting like that? And you can tell that that's kind of why they wanted him for this, because it would just be weird and over the top and give such a Nicolas Cage acting. And you know what? I will say, he had been wanting to play Dracula for a long time, to the point where, you know, he in one movie when he acted alongside Christopher Lee, you know, he said Christopher Lee's like his favorite Dracula, and he said that he was shown Nosferatu at a young age, and he based a lot of what his portrayal would be in this on Christopher Lee. So at least, you know, he had some kind of like reverence for the role and for wanting to be this. You know, he got his teeth like filed down so that he could so that the teeth that they put in for the Dracula, the prosthetics, he'd be able to speak a lot better. So you can tell like he really wanted to play this role, and he would go a little bit of lengths to be like, okay, I'm going to do a good job. And you know what? I will say, at least for this film, he does do a pretty good job. William Ragsdale, who portrays the elderly priest, is best known for playing Charlie Brewster in the Fright Night films, and like Fright Night is amazing. I got to do Fright Night sometime. We'll review that one because that's an amazing film. I've never seen Fright Night 2, but I actually heard that it's actually not too bad, that it's actually a pretty good movie. But that I just love that they were like, let's bring Charlie Brewster in for like, I mean, sure, it's not really, I don't think it's even like, I think it's just like a small credited role, but like, and he doesn't really have, I think he has like a line or two, and I couldn't even tell that was him. But I'm glad that they're like, hey, let's bring back Charlie Brewster for this film, and it's a cool little like Easter egg type of like cool like cameo, because like Fright Night's a great film. Like honestly, if you haven't seen Fright Night and you like vampire films, that's probably like one of the best ones that I've ever seen out there. Dracula from the Francis Ford Coppola is pretty good. But and then like I would say like maybe like Blade's a pretty good one, but Fright Night is a really good. The effects in that movie are amazing. I love when like he turns into Evil Ed, starts turning into a vampire, and it's just like the effects that they do is just amazing. In the original novel and most adaptations following it, one of Dracula's abilities is controlling animals. He's often associated with wolves in particular, and in the climax of the film, Dracula teams up with the Lobo family and turns most of them into his familiars. And if you're like me, you would know and anyone who speaks Spanish would know that lobo is Spanish for wolf. So that's a cool little nod that they did there when they were like thinking through like, oh, what do we call the crime family? Like the Lobos, because it kind of makes sense too. Because it's like, oh yeah, what else would they like? Oh, of course they're gonna call themselves. I mean, sure, that's their last name, but also is like wolves, and it's like intimidating for the people. But then it just makes sense for like Dracula and all his like thing. And yeah, and that's something that I think a lot of people miss is like from the novel, is that like a lot of the things that we like to associate with Dracula, like I think like sunlight, I'm pretty sure he can go out in like some like sun, like it's not gonna like hurt him too much. And then I know like the garlic thing isn't in there, and like I know he can turn into like a mist, but yeah, he can also turn into a wolf himself if he wants to. Like Dracula in the novel has a lot more powers and is a lot more like intimidating than we see him in like any adaptation in the films. And I think that's something that it kind of loses. I know like in Francis Ford Coppola's, they from the 90s Dracula, they do add back a lot, or he adds from the adaptation like the powers that he used to have. And honestly, like Dracula would be kind of OP in like in these some of these adaptations. That would be a lot harder to kill him. Renfield tries to stop the self-help counselor from inviting Dracula in. According to vampire lore, vampires can only enter a house or abode when they are specifically invited in. And this also features prominently in the novel. I love this. This was so funny when this came up. But when Renfield arrives back at his apartment and sees Dracula waiting inside, he glances back at his welcome mat, which reads "Welcome, come on in," which is just a hilarious take on the fact that vampires have to be invited in before they enter. And I love that that technically counts, because you're just like saying to everybody, welcome, you can come on in. And I think that's hilarious, that like this idea that like just because like it's like it just says that means that like, oh yeah, I guess like I mean he has it on his mat. He has a sign out there. It says it's okay for me to just waltz in. I love that. I think that was pretty funny. That was a pretty funny joke right there. But that's all we got for trivia for now. Let's move on to the kill counter. Kill counter. So Renfield has a massive overall death toll with 51 kills. This is probably the most I've seen in a movie in a while. There are also lots of deaths implied or said to take place off screen, but as per my usual, I don't count them if I don't see them. So let's break this down by who does the killing. At the start of the film, we see the assassin Apache Joe stab Mitch, who's the boyfriend of one of Renfield's fellow self-help members. He stabs him in the temple with a knife. Apache Joe is killed just after, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Moving on to Rebecca's kills. She has a total of 12 kills with 11 unnamed men and Lobo members. Most are shot in the head or the face, or one of them is killed by slamming their head into a fork. But I'll get to the last kill for hers later as well. Next we have Renfield. He's responsible for killing Apache Joe by punching his head off, so that's where we left off with Apache Joe. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. He just comes, he just punches his head and just flies right off. Renfield kills 22 unnamed men and Lobo members. Him ultimately killing Teddy Lobo by kicking him in the stomach and causing his internal organs to come out his mouth and anus. Finally, we have Dracula himself. We see him kill a priest and 2 vampire hunters in a flashback. He also kills Mark, the leader of the self-help group, and the self-help group entirely. And Dracula kills 10 unnamed men and Lobo members. Dracula's killed by Renfield and Rebecca. They beat and dismember him with a sledgehammer, axe, and chainsaw. And they make it so that he can't reform himself. In total, that's 51 deaths. So much blood, gore, and organs flying everywhere. And it's a great time. I love when they just up the gore. The scene where they burst into the restaurant when Renfield's like sitting there trying to think about like, okay, well, I gotta get either some nuns or some virgins on a bus or whatever, and they just come in and they got the wolf masks, and he just goes around and just starts murdering everybody. And him and Rebecca, and then like later when they're at the apartment and they just go on their like this huge killing spree because the cops just show up to raid everything, and they just massacre everybody. And like at the end too, like when they go in to break into the Lobos to get Kate, which is I think Rebecca's sister, and they just massacre everybody there too. And it's just a good, funny, hilarious, gory time, blood everywhere. So if you like gore and stuff, you'll like this. And if you like to laugh too. So with that though, let's get straight into my final thoughts. So now we've come to the part of the podcast where I get into my final thoughts on the film. This movie, Renfield, as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, this is probably going to be pretty funny. Nicholas Holt's not like my favorite actor or anything. In fact, I don't really care for much for him in most movies, but I think he did a pretty good job. And I think it was once because in the very initial trailer, they built up to who was Dracula and who's going to play him in this. And as soon as you see Nicolas Cage as Dracula and just knowing what he could bring to the role and what he did bring to the role, I was already like, yes, I got to see this one. I saw it as soon as it came out. I saw it again with my friend because he didn't get to see it. And I just love like Nicolas Cage's take on this, and he had like since I would say maybe a couple years back with like Mandy, the color space or whatever, I forgot what it's called. Willy's Wonderland, I think, is another one that he's been in. He's kind of been on a roll of like pretty memorable and good like roles. He's not taking some of those ridiculous ones where he was taking just to kind of make money because he needed the money. And I think this role in particular, because it was one he wanted to actually be in and one he's been wanting to fill, and he took a lot of the mannerisms from people he admired, I think that helped to create Dracula and this portrayal of Dracula in such a great way, and his take on it is just hilarious. And you know, having Nicholas Hoult, Nicolas Cage, Awkwafina, and Ben Schwartz, hilarious. Ben Schwartz is hilarious. I love him as Jean-Ralphio, and I wish he'd be in more things. I mean, he's Sonic, right? Yeah, he's Sonic. I wish he would be in more things because he's hilarious. And Awkwafina, I know there's some controversy surrounding her lately with like her using like blackfishing, I guess it's what it's called now, where you use like that type of vernacular and speech, and people say that she used that as a way to get roles, and then now she's just dropped it, and it was just like an act, a way to like put on. And all right, that's fine. And I'm not saying it's fine that like she did that. I'm saying it's like, yeah, good, call her out for the things. Anyone needs to be called out for the things that they do if they're bad. I still like Awkwafina. I think she's still been in a couple of things. And she did a great job in The Farewell. But yeah, you're right. If just like I would say any other person who I like, if they do something stupid or they say something stupid or they act a certain way and it's not right. You need to call them out. Like when one of my favorite actresses is Scarlett Johansson. When she was going to take a role to play a trans man, that's ridiculous. No. Why is she going to do that? Or Letitia Wright, when she recently, back when they were still filming Black Panther, she was like tweeting a lot about like kind of like anti-vax kind of stuff. And no, you rightly called her out for it. Even though I love her, like, and I don't see anything with her in it, it's just like you're dumb. I don't know why you would be doing this when you know people are going to call you out for this stuff, and rightly so. Like, it hurts people. Like, it hurts people like not getting a role, or like it hurts people like they literally die, right, when not taking the vaccine. So yeah, like using this kind of like blackfishing, which is kind of like using kind of like blackface. It's kind of like blackface. Essentially, you're using this portrayal of yourself of like, oh, using this kind of slang, using this tone of voice to get like people to hire you, and then ultimately you can just drop that and you don't have to act that way later in other roles, but you still got the fame and the fortune from using that, and that's not okay. That's not okay at all. But beyond that, I don't mean but. Like, no, it's not right at all. So with all of that being said, she does a good job in this role. That's all I'm going to say about that. Just like everyone else does a pretty good job in the role that they've got. The direction was pretty solid. I love the gore that they decided to go with. The comedy was pretty good. Like I said, like with the joke about like the mat saying welcome, come in, and it just is like an invite, a blanket invite for Dracula to come in. I love the parts with the group, the self-help group. That whole thing is hilarious unto itself. I love this idea of like he's talking about one thing, they're talking about some other things, and then they're kind of like, wait, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Type of thing. And then like, oh yeah, come on in to let Dracula in, and he just slaughters everybody. And just him talking to Renfield is hilarious. It's this type of like, come on, you're my servant, you got to do what I say. Like, why are you doing all this kind of stuff? It's fun. It's a good time. It's pretty good to see like them in this kind of role. There's not really too much to it. I would say like it's only like an hour and a half, I think, so not too much to the film. I do like the idea like he can just heal him with his blood, so he can just keeps him alive as long as he wants and just keeps him there. And then like the fact that he had like a family like years ago, and now he just like kind of gave that up for Dracula. And it's just like this, they had such like an unhealthy relationship. Honestly, it kind of would have been funny to see like he still goes along with Dracula at the end, and like he like just turns on everybody and like helps Dracula, and then he would just be like, it would just be this kind of like funny thing of like he's just Sisyphus over and over pushing up that boulder, but it just keeps going back down the hill, and he has to just keep doing it over and over again. Like he's just meant to suffer at the hands of Dracula for the rest of his life. He has to serve Dracula for forever, and it would have been kind of funny. I do like the way that they took it though. That's okay. Overall, like I said, the acting is pretty fine. The direction, the practical effects are pretty good. I love the lighting in there's scenes with Dracula when he's in the rundown hospital, and they backlight him in red, and it's just like, I love the lighting there, and like the lighting in New Orleans and some of the scenes in like the restaurant, they do the lighting really well. Like there's greens and reds, and I love these kinds of hues that they do. And there's colors in like the apartment that I really like, that to show like, oh, like he's moving away from like these darker, more bloody like colors to more happier, like sunshinier colors, and he's trying to get away from Dracula with like the blacks and the reds. And it's overall, the art direction was pretty good. So overall, the film is pretty good. If you want like a good, funny, like gory, kind of scary in the realm of scary. It's not. I wouldn't say it's really that scary, but if you want to see Nicolas Cage be over the top, Nicolas Cage like he always is, then this is one for you. If you want to see Awkwafina and Ben Schwartz be kind of funny for a little bit, yeah, this one's for you. I give this one a thumbs up. It's pretty good. Were you surprised by Renfield? Did you like Nicolas Cage's performance? Did you hate the comedic tone? Let us know on all of your socials. Thank you all for listening, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe to get every new episode downloaded. Do you have any strange, mysterious, or unexplained stories? Are they fact? Or did you craft them yourself? If you'd like us to read your stories, you can email them to us at horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to read them on the podcast. We'd also like to post those stories on our socials on Instagram, Threads, or TikTok. That's all at Horrorbox Podcast, where we also have updates and news. One last thing, if you like the podcast and would like to support the podcast, you can buy me a coffee. You can buy me a coffee at coffee.com/horrorboxpodcast. It would really help out. We'll see you next time and hear what comes out from the horror box.